Today is March 6th, 2024. My name is Joe Reingold, and I'm here interviewing Myra Fischel. Good afternoon, Myra.
Good afternoon.
Well, tell us about whatever you know about your family, where your grandparents were from, your parents, what they did for a living, etc.
Okay. I'm a first-generation American. I knew two of my four grandparents. No, I knew three of my four grandparents. And I was, my maternal side came from Romania, and my grandfather came ahead of his family. They had 6 kids, and he came to Montgomery, Alabama. He must have been a pretty smart man because he started buying property instantly. As soon as he started with a push cart very briefly and then started acquiring property, he ultimately went into the scrap iron business and had a very successful career. My grandmother was wonderful. She was a Romanian cook. I can still remember what was it called? I can't remember the name. Anyway, she made all the Romanian dishes and taught my mom. My mom was one of 6, so she learned to cook from her mother. I didn't learn much cooking from my mother because by the time I came around, she wasn't interested in doing much cooking. Anyway, my paternal side, my maternal were from Montgomery, Alabama. My paternal side, my dad's family, immigrated from Kiev and came to Birmingham, Alabama. Strange story that one is. They came in through a sponsor from Johns, Alabama. I don't even think it exists on a map today. But they were very nice to my father and his family. And my grandfather, who I never met, worked for the Birmingham News. And my grandfather, paternal grandfather, died when my dad was 16. He was in high school, so he went to school. His mother was insistent that he graduate high school. But then he worked after school every day for the Birmingham News. So he inherited the position. I think it was circulation. I think he probably delivered papers. I'm not sure, but I'm sure my grandfather had very, or if any, knowledge of English. My father came to this country when he was, I think, 8 years old. On the other side, my mother came to this country when she was 2 years old. So neither have any recollection of the old country at all. They became instantly American. Nothing was ever talked about the old country. They talked about, this is our new home, this is where we're going to live, this is where we're going to raise our family. This is not an uncommon story. So that's my background. So I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, where my father's family had been from, and he married my mother, who was from Montgomery, Alabama, and we spent our growing up days in Birmingham. So I can talk a little bit about that. We started out when I was young at the conservative shul.
But I was going to ask you, how did your parents meet?
My
from different
parents
cities?
met in, I'm not sure. I know the story that I've always heard is my father introduced my mother's sister to her future husband, and they had 7 kids. Yeah. And they lived in Jasper, Alabama. Where my parents met, I don't know. The stories I heard from my dad are he didn't have any money, and he was working in, I don't know, eventually furniture. So the great story that goes with that is his competitor family set my dad up in the furniture business. He was working for the Birmingham News until his good family friend, the Sokol family, the very prominent Birmingham family, said to him, this is not what a nice Jewish boy should be doing. We're going to give you a store. And they set him, they were furniture dealers, big, all over Alabama. And they set my dad up in his first furniture store with inventory. And Dad said, I can't afford this. And he said, you don't have to. So they were wonderful. They were lifetime friends. And their kids and grandkids I grew up with. So that was really nice. So I have lots of stories of my parents and grandparents here, but I knew my maternal grandfather only briefly because he died in Montgomery when I was young.
Oh, okay. All right. So what did you do? Tell me some things that you did to keep busy in school all the way through high school.
Oh, I was real busy. I was very involved in Temple Youth. So I started saying we started out at the conservative shul, but one Sunday morning we got up to go to Sunday school, and Mother said, "We're going to a new Sunday school today." And I said, "Oh," and she said, "Yes, we decided you're going to the Reformed Temple." I said, "What do I know?" I was probably 6 or 8 years old. And I said, "Oh, okay, Mom, whatever you say is what we do," right? I got very involved in the religious school, primarily with Temple Youth as a teenager. I was involved in what was called SEFTY, Southeastern Federation of Temple Youth, and I became an officer in the city chapter and then in the regional chapter, and I went to a nifty National Federation of Temple Youth camp in Zionsville, Indiana as a junior in high school, and I fell in love with all things Temple Youth. So I did that. Then I was a camp counselor later, well, before college, at Camp Blue Star.
Yeah.
In Hendersonville, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So my roots are all from the southeast. I'm not a native Texan.
That's okay. What did you do after high school?
Well, this was an interesting story. I was supposed to be. I was at Camp Blue Star as a counselor the summer before my freshman year in college. And I was supposed to be going to Skidmore College in upstate New York. It was freezing cold that summer, and you never made long distance calls. It just was not done. But I called Mom and Dad in Birmingham, and I said, "I can't do it, I can't do it." And they said, "You've lost your mind. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I got an acceptance to the University of Texas."
Oh.
And I knew one person who had gone to UT, and she loved it. And I said, "I think I'm going to try UT for a year or so. And then I'll probably be back in Alabama and go to the University of Alabama like everybody else did." But I wanted to go away for 1 year, and I did not want it to be upstate New York. So I went to Texas in 1960, and I graduated there in 1964, and I became a Texan for life. I
You never
met my
went back.
husband in
Right.
Austin, and he was a Mississippian, and I was from Alabama. We knew a lot of the same people because of Temple Youth.
Right.
And we went to some of the, he was 2.5 years older than me, so we had different friends, but we do have one friend here today who knew us from when we were in high school, both of us individually. She was from New Orleans, and I was from Birmingham, and he was from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Bert grew up in Vicksburg, Mississippi, old Civil War town, and we knew each other, but we, and she did not introduce us. We met at the summer before my senior year at UT. We met by the swimming pool at the apartment in Austin, and we married the following summer.
Oh, wow.
So we've been married now 60 years.
So what did you both do right after college? Did you relocate at that point?
Right out of when I graduated college, I went home to get married in the temple in Birmingham. Mother insisted that I was going nowhere but coming home to plan the wedding. I was the second of 2 girls, and my sister had this huge, elaborate, extensive wedding, which I did not want. And so we had a small, like under 100 people in the chapel with mainly cousins, because we had a lot of cousins in Alabama. And Bert's family, as an aside, were Reformed Jews from way, way back. And they were from Montgomery, Alabama. My family in Birmingham were all conservative except us. And he was so nervous about they were all from Montgomery, but they were different country clubs, different synagogues. And he said, "How are they going to get along?" And I said, "They'll get along. Don't worry about it. It'll happen." And it did, and they became good friends. Later, they closed the conservative country club in Montgomery, and they were all in the Reform, and they all got along. So,
That's good.
yeah. After college, We married in August of 64, and Bert was working at a small business investment company outside of Austin. So we took an apartment in Austin. It's still there. We went by to see it not long ago. I couldn't believe it hasn't changed any in Northwest Austin. So when we were down there for something, we went by it to see if it still existed, and it did. It outlived the grocery store across the street, but it is still there. 4 months after we were married, Bert got an opportunity to go to work for Texas Instruments in Dallas. He came up they flew him up for an interview, and he was in advertising and public relations for his whole career, and they were looking for somebody to handle their corporate newspaper and to do recruitment advertising for Texas Instruments. So that was 1964, and he maintained a relationship with Texas Instruments for 30 years in the advertising business, not at TI. He stayed at TI for 2.5 years and then went to a series of advertising agencies till he started his own. Anyway, I was the willing partner going from Austin to Dallas. I was planning to come teach in Dallas. I had an offer after graduation from DISD, but then Bert and I got pretty serious about this marriage thing, and he was going to be in Austin, I was going to be in Dallas. So I turned down the contract from DISD. We moved up here in December of 64 and lived in Richardson. And we had our first apartment there. We had our first home. We had our first 2 homes in Richardson. So our kids grew up in the early years in Richardson Independent School District.
Which is still a good one.
It certainly is.
Yes,
and
yes.
It gave them a great background. After they were in mid-school and upper school, they went off to Green Hill. We decided we needed a little more heavy-duty focus on the core curriculums that we thought they needed. So we sent them to Green Hill, and we were able to do it. So
When you moved here to Dallas, what did you and your husband do together or separately? What did you join? Did you do anything civically or Jewishly?
yes, we almost immediately joined Temple Shalom.
Okay.
We had friends who were there, and we joined Temple Shalom, and we stayed there for about 3 years, I think. And we had our first child, was a girl, and she was named at Temple Shalom by the rabbi. And then before our second child, who was a boy, was born, we had changed over to Temple Emmanuel. Bert took the lead on this more than me. He felt that we would not get lost in this huge congregation. We would find our way, and he ended up being president. So the rest is history. He's still very involved in Temple Emmanuel. I, in a lesser role, I got almost immediately involved in National Council of Jewish Women. And that is my core civic organization forever. And it's where I learned social justice. And I did an awful lot of social justice work over the years. I was fortunate enough to have received their highest award, the Hannah G. Solomon Award, for my civic engagements in lots and lots of charity work. So I did that, but I always had a career. My first career was while Bert was working at TI doing his thing. I got a job working for the Dallas County Juvenile Department, handling contested custody suits and divorce. I was all of 21 years old, but it was so funny back then. I met their requirements. They would not hire anybody who had children. You had to be married and no children. Well, I fit in that category, and I had a college degree and the right stuff, so they hired me. I was there for about 3 years until I had our first child. And I loved the experience of working with, doing social work, handling tough decisions for families, and seeing where the kids would be best off, because so often in divorce, the parents treat the kids like property. And I never forgot that lesson. The kids needed to be individualized, and they needed to be loved for who they were, not for what their parents thought of them.
Right. You said you had other careers after that?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
What
else did you?
I had many careers.
Right.
After that, I stayed home until our son was 10. I remember planning his bar mitzvah on the phone, so I'd gone to work then. I was a realtor in Dallas for 38 years.
Wow.
Sold many, many houses all over the place. So all around here and north of here. I never went really toward Park Cities. I kind of stopped at Northwest Highway. That's because I wanted to be home every afternoon after my kids were home from school. So I would finish my day before 3 and be home and cook dinner, and we had dinner together as a family. And that was very, very important to me. Because I hadn't had that experience when I was growing up, because Mom and Dad were always at the store, and I was at home with the housekeeper, and that was not the way I wanted to raise my children. So I had a little resentment about that. But I had wonderful parents. So anyway, I did real estate until about 4 or 5 years ago. So I had a very successful real estate career. And all along, I continued to do volunteer work for about every organization. The most recent one that I got heavily involved in is called Literacy Achieves. And it is a wonderful program for new immigrants. And I did teach ESL originally. English as a second language. They came from all over the world. But then they were opening up a citizenship program, and I thought, perfect. I had been a history and social science major, and so I said, I wonder if I could do that. So I started teaching citizenship, and I did that for about 4 years as a volunteer in Vickery Meadow, right around the corner from where we're living now.
Right.
I know this neighborhood pretty well, and it was a great volunteer commitment. And I had the good fortune of going to one of my students invited me to her swearing in ceremony to get her citizenship, and she was from Liberia, and she had a family of 6, and they all came dressed in purple and gold to match with the grandparents and the aunts and uncles, and it was huge. And I was kind of the only outsider there. But I loved it. It was very special, and she was such a proud new American. So I feel good about that career, too.
Right, wonderful. Can you think of anybody along the way that you would consider your mentor?
I've had a number of mentors over the years. You know, a lot of the people I met through NCJW, I really cherished knowing. Rose Saginaw was a family friend, and she did a lot of work with Bird, and she was very instrumental in helping guide me and lead me in some of the things I learned along the way. She even taught me bridge, so which I no longer play, but I had fun doing it. And she was really an inspirational person. My teachers along the way, I had a college professor who was a specialist in Middle Eastern politics, if you can believe, back in the 60s. And he said, and he was Jewish, his name was Professor Leiden, Carl Leiden, and I was his teaching assistant because I loved every word he dished out, and I was formulating ideas of who I was and what I thought, and I got a lot of inspiration from him. So I would say he was a mentor too.
That's wonderful, really wonderful. Can you think of anything that you would say you were extremely proud of, something you really achieved?
Yeah, I think I'm very proud of my children.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've
That's
heard
a good
that from
Jewish mother,
everybody.
yes, well.
I am a good Jewish mother,
Yeah.
but we have
Where
had,
are they here?
No,
No.
And that's the other different thing from
Yeah.
living at Legacy. We have no children here. We have no grandchildren here. One of our grandchildren is living in Austin, working in Austin. He graduated from SMU. So he came here because he said he always loved visiting us when he came to Dallas. And he said, well, I think I'll apply to SMU. He ended up having 4 very good years there, and he's been in Texas since. So they are from Los Altos, California, north of San Jose, south of Palo Alto, in a little hamlet community that's just lovely. And have lived there now in the house they're in now for 20 years. So I have 2 grandsons there. And then our son and his family live in Seattle. And he has a big role in Microsoft. He's in charge of AI and Chat GPT for Microsoft. So we can try to catch him sometimes on the weekends, but not too often. He has 2 kids. I guess I'm proudest of the fact that both of them married Jewish. We didn't push that. That was not our kind of Reform Judaism, but we gave them the opportunities, and they didn't go to Jewish camps or any of that. But they met and married Jewish, and they both have Jewish homes. All the kids have been bar and bat mitzvahed. And there's a thread that runs through both of their homes that is profoundly Jewish. And who knows what will happen with the next generation. Yeah. I won't venture a guess on that, but at least they have very strong Jewish roots.
That's wonderful. That's quite something.
I think we're lucky.
These days.
We didn't push them in any direction. We said, you'll find your own way. We have always been of the belief that if you give them the tools, they'll figure out how to use them. And that's how we ran our home. And it's been good to us. We have very good memories.
That's great. I always ask people who are not natives of Dallas, if you can think back, I know you've been here a long time, what was Dallas like back then versus what you've seen, all the changes you've seen now?
Well, when we came to Dallas, we moved immediately to Richardson. It was a sleepy small town of about 17,000 people. We watched it grow while we were there to over 50,000. We owned 2 homes in Richardson. And then we moved, after the kids were out of high school and in college, we moved south of LBJ to near Forest and Preston. So we built our adult house, our forever after home, which we lived in for 30 years. And we sold it, we moved in here when I got tired of running a home. So, Dallas was small then. Dallas was a sleepy town. Dallas had some bad history, and we just ignored the bad history and said, we'll make our own. And we had very good friends here, we've got some of the same friends we've had for all 60 years since we moved here. And when it came time to start thinking of the future, we thought we'd take a look at this and see if Legacy was a place we could fit in. We didn't know if we could or we couldn't, but I got simply tired of cooking and cleaning and running a home and going to the grocery store, and it just became kind of a mundane day-to-day. And we thought, they've got a lot of stuff going on at Legacy Midtown. Maybe we should take a look. And we did. We loved it immediately and decided we could live here even with no kids or grandkids here. We could make our way here.
It becomes a family, kind
of.
It does. Your own family.
Really, it does.
Yes. So no regrets.
No regrets whatsoever. No.
Okay.
And we've found our way in this community. Well, I guess before we came, as soon as we came in, we heard people whispering, oh, he was president of Temple Emmanuel. And I thought, oh, is this what we're in for? He can't get past his past, but he is still very involved in Temple Emmanuel. And I lesser so. I'm still involved in NCJW. I still love what they're doing, and we are financial supporters of both. Okay, so.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for doing all the good work you've done, and we really appreciate it.
Is that it?
That's it.
We're done? Have I given you all the information
Absolutely.
you need?
Unless you can add whatever you like.
No, I'm fine. Okay. I'm good. It was a pleasure to do this.
Thank you.
I know these interviews have been going on for a while.